Good morning to everybody. Dr. Angodimat, Professor Rentara, Professor Brahmanan, and the other learned faculty members of the CMDR, my young friends who are coming here to undertake the course on research methodology in this institution, and invitees. At the very outset, I express my sincere thanks to the organizers of this course for inviting me to inaugurate this function. And I also thank Professor Prabhakar, who made a detailed introduction about me, which was not necessary. Anyway, I thank you very much. Having said this, my friend Professor Angodimat asked me on which topic I have to speak here. I said I will just give a general observation of what the research is and what is the state of higher education today and how you have to equip yourself in doing the research without making any specific classroom lecture. And therefore, I just initially want to explain the state of the higher education in our country and the need for the research here. And then what are the issues, a few issues which are cropping up in the research area today, which are to be kept in mind for undertaking the research. And a few the steps which the research students will have to remember while starting the research. So this is my area of discussion with you today. I hope the time will be sufficient for me to speak about half an hour or something like that. Now you know that the knowledge as well as the human capital produced by the higher education play a very important role in the growth of the national economy. And therefore, the higher education plays a very important role. And it is also said that the expansion of the knowledge through higher education helps to enhance the efficiency of the economy and develop competitiveness in the world. If at all you want to compete with other worlds, you will have to have the intellectuals backed up by higher education. Therefore, today the importance to the higher education is given by the government of India also. Earlier, before the 21st century, not much of the importance was given even in our country for higher education. We gave more importance for primary education and secondary education. But today, that's in the first decade of the 21st century, government is providing the scope and importance for the higher development, higher education. And looking at the enrollment ratio of the higher education, in higher education, it's very meager in our country. According to the HRD report in 2019, it was just 27%. Whereas in other countries, especially in the USA, European countries, it is about 70 to 74%. So we are lagging behind the encouragement for the higher education. And not only that, most of the higher educational institutions at present in our country or in private sector. And you might be wondering, nearly 75% of the private colleges are working, constituting about 66% of the enrollment in higher education. That speaks about the role of these private institutions. Therefore, there is a need for the public sector to expand, enhance the higher education in the rural areas. And apart from this, when you look at the enrollment in the PhD programs, it's very meager. Looking at the data available in 2019 by the HRD department, it is 0.54% of the total people engaged in higher education. 0.54% of the people are registered for higher education in our country. Whereas in other countries, the percentage of the enrollment in higher education is around 3 to 4%. In European countries, as well as in Japan and other countries, it is 3 to 4%. So therefore, the PhD enrollment. And therefore, when you look at this, not only that, when you look at the percentage of the PhDs enrolled in different the subjects, it is found that 50% of the enrollment in PhD is only in science and technology. Only 10% is enrolled in social sciences, and the least is in medicine, only 4%. So this is the situation where the scope for PhD is still very high in our country. And in addition to this, if you look at the expenditure on this higher education or the PhD program, this is very meager in our country, especially we call it this expenditure on the research and development. Research and development expenditure as a percentage of the GDP in our country is just a little about 7%, or 0.7%, not 7%, 0.7%. Whereas in other countries, it is more than the 13%, 14% in all advanced countries. Not only that, when you look at the R&D expenditure of the universities in India, it is just 6%. 6% of the money is spent by all the universities only for the PhD program. Whereas in France or in USA, UK, it is about 24%, 22%, 23%. So that means there is a scope for development of the PhD programs in most of in our country. And why research is required? The question is why the PhD program? PhD is nothing but the aspiring for doing some research. What is meant by research? It is nothing but the exploring the truth through a systematic arrangement of the information available with the equipments or the tools of the research. And when this research is carried out, it has an influence of influencing the policymakers in the country, especially those who are running the government. They are also influenced by the research outcomes made by the researchers, and it can also influence the markets. And in addition to this, it contributes for the well-being of the human being. That's a very important thing. That means research is very much essential for the growth of the economy, for making a competitiveness in the world economy. Research is essential. When this is the case, what type of the problems which we are facing today? One of the important problems which I consider or which we see is that we are not able to question the settled problems. Whatever the things we are doing here is we are not questioning We are not questioning the things which have been already framed by the earlier researchers. For example, when not only that, for the sake of acquiring the knowledge, research is not being done in our country. Research for the long-term benefit is not being done today. It was there in the earlier period, but nowadays, with the modernization, research is done only from the point of a short term. Long term, the considerations are not considered at all. Only short term considerations, only the cause and consequences which are resulted through the sporadic, the events are undertaken by the researchers. For example, let me give you one or two examples so that you will be able to know that in the earlier days, the problems of poverty are dealt in a different way, and the sustainable growth strategies are worked out. But later on, the NREGA program has come. Most of the researchers are concentrating only on the various aspects of the NREGA program. The question is whether the programs of NREGA are capable of solving the problem of the problem of the poverty in the country is not examined at all. This is the major problem. Or for example, how the various sectors are contributing to the growth of the economy. Let me give you an example where there is a vast disparity in the per capita income of the agriculture sector as well as non-agriculture sector. This disparity is about 1 to 6%. Why this is happening? Because you know that nearly 55% of the GDP is contributed from the service sector, and consumption basket of the consumers consisting of commodities is about 75%. Service sector contributes 55% of the GDP, but your consumer's basket, 75% of the consumer's basket consists of commodities for which no research is being done. And in addition to this, even today, 50 to 55% of the people are engaged in agriculture, but it contributes only to the extent of 17% of the GDP. So as a result of these things are not properly discussed, researched by the people. And not only that, so these are the various important aspects which have been completely left to the relegation. And not only that, the research is not properly funded by the public institutions or by the government. The expenditure on research by the government is declining, whereas the spending on research is increasing. Organizations, some companies, industries, they are increasing. But what is the effect of such an increase in the expenditure by the private sector? The effect is that it will not help for enhancement of the knowledge, because most of the researches are taking place project oriented. They are not knowledge oriented or knowledge expanding researches, project oriented. So when the sponsors are providing the projects, they provide a landmark that what should be the scope, nature, design of your research. That means you are not having any freedom to choose your own methodology. You don't have the freedom to choose your own, the choice to select the sample or use the techniques to do the research. So as a result of it, there is no enhancement of the knowledge at all. You are trying to, the research is undertaken to meet the goals of the private agencies. So, welcome Professor Nigiri.
Welcome Professor Ranagiri, who was a former director of this institute. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining this. Thank you so much, sir.
So as a result of it, what happens is real research for enhancement of the knowledge is relegated to the background. And therefore there is a scope for enhancement of the expenditure by the public sector. And we cannot, so as a result of it, a real contribution to the knowledge is not coming from the research activities, which is not helping for the growth of the economy, which is not going to help for competing in a global situation. Therefore, there is a need to increase the expenditure, or there is a need to finance more from the public sector. And not only that, as I just pointed out, that the universities are also not able to spend more money on these things. And another thing is, when the private agencies are sponsoring the research activities, they are normally profit oriented. They are not like public, the research funding. They are profit oriented. Say if the expenditure is made by a private consultancy services or private the organization, they will see how best they can get the profit from their own business, where to push it. So therefore, your research is not going to contribute to the real knowledge expansion, but it will meet the requirement of the sponsoring agencies. That means it is the present research is project rating. What I feel is it is a project rating. The people are not concentrating more on the developing the knowledge into deeper going into the deeper depth of the subject. So this is one important the problem which we are facing. The second one is the connected with quality and reliability of the data. Most of the students, when want to conduct the research, they have to collect the data and all that. And a lot of information is collected by various organizations today. Individual researchers are collecting, public organizations are collecting, public institutions are collecting, autonomous institutions are collecting, NGOs are collecting, individual researchers are collecting. But that means we must be happy that India has a system of collecting the data by innumerable sources. But the question is, how far the data which is collected is reliable, and how far they can be used for achieving certain goals of the research. Reliability is a very important aspect. One of the important questions here is sometimes the data are collected either by the surveys, sample surveys, or complete enumeration, whatever may be, using interview method or schedules, whatever may be the case. When the data are collected, we are just taking for granted that the data is available. But the question is, to what extent the data collector is capable of collecting appropriate data is not known. It is not disclosed what is his education qualification, and it is also not known how the respondent is responding to the questions raised by the persons who are collecting the data. That means there may be misunderstanding because the language problem is there. People are going with the English language, or even while writing the research report, you people will also face the problem of language. I shall come to that later on. But the question is, there is a communication gap between the interviewer and the respondent, and therefore the data which are collected may not be will have to be verified properly. We cannot completely reject them, or we cannot completely suspect them, but there is a probability of uncertainties. And not only that, methodologies will differ by different organizations. Even if the same data is collected, or the same purpose data is collected by different organizations, the data will vary from one organization to the other organizations. So income data collected by one organization may be different from the income data collected by other organizations. The expenditure data collected by one organization differ from others. So there is a variation in the data collected by different organizations. You have to see which data is which can be used. Even perhaps most of you, if you have read the national income estimates, there also there was a lot of problems. The problems of comparability. So therefore, one of the important problems faced in research is that of collecting reliable data, and the velocity of these particular data is a very important thing. And lastly, the third important problem which most of the research the studies face is the quantitative analysis. This is a very important aspect which one has to think. When you start researching, and now you are coming for the methodology course here, where the various techniques are going to be dealt with, and in most of the cases, the data which are collected are tuned, and they are used by econometric methods or statistical methods, using the correlations or multivariation regression analysis and so on. What they say is, normally most of the economists are making use of the regression analysis, multivariate regression analysis, and many other things are used. And this particular analysis try to explain the relation between the dependent and independent variables, variations in the forecast, and various aspects of the things we are going to explain. While using this data for getting the results, one must have a theoretical idea that how one is related with other variable, how irrigation is related with agriculture, how literacy is related with agricultural growth, agricultural productivity, how the fertilizer use is related with the productivity in agriculture, whether it will have a positive sign or negative sign. You must have a brainstorming image. That means you must have a first-hand information, first-hand knowledge about how these things are related to each other. Unless you explain or think about the relation between the various variables, you cannot make use of the quantitative techniques. So the point blindly you cannot make use of the techniques for for arriving certain results without understanding the intricacies of these things. And in addition to this, the techniques are not capturing non-economic factors, political factors, socio inequality factors, atmosphere. All these things are not included in this technical factors. So therefore, techniques which you are using for research must be carefully understood, and the theory behind must be understood properly. Then only you can make use of these particular the techniques for arriving certain the results. So therefore, it's not that easy to do the research. These are the various problems which are coming up, and as a researcher, you will have to follow certain methodology. Why methodology is necessary for you to do the research? Research methodology course is required because research methodology serves as a guiding principle, and it helps you to use the tools for analysis of the data, and it also brings about systematic the development of the issues, the knowledge, and arrive at certain important conclusions. Therefore, while doing the research methodology or undertaking the research methodology, it's the beginning, and where you'll have to remember first you have to understand the basic concepts of your research. If you are doing research in economics, some important concepts you must be able to understand. Say, for example, what is the elasticity? What is the the Laffer curve. So certain important aspects one has to understand. What is the physical deficit? So while doing the research, you must be careful in understanding these particular concepts. And this requires understanding of the theories. Unless you make a detailed study of the theories of economics, you will not be able to succeed in doing the research. So therefore, if you have not done a theoretical background so far, spend your time fruitfully for the next 15 days in the library to read the textbooks and understand the theories. Unless you understand the theories of a particular area, you will not be able to do the research at all. For example, suppose you want to do the research in regional disparities. Why regional disparities? What do you mean by the regional disparity? What is the theory behind it? What are the economic factors affecting these things? You must be able to understand these particular aspects. Therefore, one must have a comprehensive idea of a theories which helps you to understand or do the research. And after doing this, you have to specialize the area of your specialization. You have the different branches of economics. The transport economics is there, public finance is there, money in banking is there, agricultural economics, industrial economics. You have to choose a particular branch. You have to choose a particular branch. After choosing it, and that selection of the branch depends upon your interest. Your interest. You must have a liking. Suppose if you want to do the public finance, you must have an idea what is public finance, what are taxes, and how the government policies are framed. You must have an idea and you must have an interest where you want to grow yourself in the particular field. So you must have an interest in choosing the field, and having done this, make a vast economic literature survey. Economic literature, having decided the area, you must make a vast literature survey by going through the books, by using the journals and various articles and discussing with your friends. You must review the entire literature on a particular topic. Having done this, then you have to adopt the methodology of your research. What type of the methodology you want to have? Whether you want to have a qualitative research, you want to make use of the quantitative methods, want to make use of the quantitative methods, qualitative methods, descriptive, and so on. So, there again you will have to decide. If you are weak in mathematics and statistics, don't go in for quantitative techniques. If you want to do in the same thing, learn it from ABCD. Try to understand what is average. Many people may not be knowing. What is average, what is standard deviation, what is correlation, and what are the important aspects of these averages and all these things. You'll have to study them. Why I am telling you, when I went for doing PhD, I had a very little knowledge of econometrics, very little knowledge of statistics. I had to physically sit in the classrooms of MSc students where my teachers used to teach the statistics and econometrics. Don't hesitate to go to the colleges or PG centers or PG classrooms where MSc classes are going on to learn these techniques, because you will not be able to understand what it is. If at all, collection of the data is another important the task of the research in the research methodology. There may be secondary data, primary data, field collection, maybe on the basis of the field, the surveys, and official data and all. In this case, when you are collecting the data from the official records of the different departments of the government, now what type of the data they are collecting, you will have to study. When you go for a primary data or a primary data where you are going to collect the data in the field with the questionnaires or the interviewers, by collecting the interviews and all that, you must specify the concepts first. When you are collecting the data on consumption or income, what type of the schedules are to be created? For example, you want to collect the data on the income of the particular family. Immediately, if you go and ask only the income, they will underestimate the income. You must have that knowledge, because they will be afraid. If the income is given at a higher level, income tax people will come and their property will be taken by the government. All these things, a lot of questions will be asked. So instead of that, you go indirectly asking them the consumption. What is your consumption? What is your saving? Then you make the comparison between these things. That means you have to use your own brain, mind, thinking on the collection of the data. So when the data is collected, then how they are to be analyzed, using the quantitative techniques or only simple tabular formula. All these things we will have to think about all these things. So having done this, you interpret it in a proper way. You interpret it in a proper way. Let me give you a small instance. When you collect the data and set a regression that the agricultural production depends upon irrigation, fertilizer consumption, literacy. Now when you are putting a regression here, you will get somewhere a negative the value for the coefficient of the irrigation. Then do you want to say that irrigation is negatively affecting the agricultural productivity? No. Then what is the reason? So you must think whether it is a heavy water consumption or disproportionate use of the fertilizer. You have to analyze many things. That means mechanically you cannot make use of the things. So therefore, the quantitative techniques will help you to get certain results. But the thinking behind these results is very important. Unless you do that, you will not be a successful researcher. And having done this, you have to interpret the things, and after interpreting, you must discuss in conferences or in seminars and explain the things whether this is correct or not. Or discuss with your friends, your teachers, your guide. Let me give you one instance why this is very important for the researchers. The discussion or presentation of your results before the including in the thesis or research report. Why this is necessary? While doing research in Baroda, somewhere in the year 1983, when I did my PhD, we presented, we used certain econometric models for the district inequality, and some methodology I had used, techniques, quantitative techniques I had used, and my guide and the head of the department asked me to present it when we had a very great economist from Delhi, Nagar, who was an econometrician, who gave a special lecture in the department like this, and I presented before him, and he said, no, this methodology cannot be used for this particular aspect. That's what it. Though our teaching community was very expert, they were all stalwarts, they worked in the foreign country and all that. He said, in the interest of the students, the future, this should not go into the thesis. If you want, you can write it in a research paper, but don't include in the thesis. That's how he suggested. And our guide and our professors at that time took it in the right way. So this is and I was able to say, I was able to write it and send it to the other countries, and the PhD program, my PhD was awarded very smoothly. So this is how it has happened during about 40 years back, but I don't know what is the situation today. And I have seen many guides are sending the message to the referees even before reaching the PhD reports. This is a very unfortunate thing. Nobody is serious. I hope, before he submits, he contacts the guide. He contacts the referees and external referee and asks them to send the report. And this is the situation now. So, whatever may be the case, your knowledge is basic. Your knowledge is very basic because you have to thrive in the society. You have to go ahead with. And in addition to this, time limit is more important for a research methodology, for doing the research. whatever the time set, you prepare for the understanding the basic concepts, theory, how much time you require to cover the theoretical understandings, review of literature, how much time is required. You plan like that. Sit for about 10 to 12 hours, 15 hours, 16 hours. Don't worry about your timings. You go on spending the money, the time in the library or in your own room. Put in more effort in understanding the things, because once you get a PhD or the award after 3 years of your hard work, you will not come back to sit and do the hard work. Try to understand the things there. So by putting more effort, you will be able to shine in the future days also. And in addition to this, your communication skill must be improved. Most of many students are coming from the rural areas, and nowadays in most of the rural areas, the teaching is in Kannada medium or regional languages and so on. And most of the researches are research papers, research articles, and research activities are taking place in English. So therefore, you give some importance, you give some time to understand, learn the things. Nothing is difficult. Only thing is you have to invest your time. You have to take care of the language proficiency. You have to take care of the learning a new language, which will help you to smoothen your PhD program. So if you take all these things into your mind, I think you will your journey of research will be very smooth. With these few words, I thank you all, and let me wish you a happy journey of your research. Thank you. If you want to use it, either you will have to master them, or you will have to learn from the others. Then only you have to make use of those things. Having understood these things, you will have to also understand how they are to be used. Then comes the data collection, as I say.